Hey folks, welcome to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Carlos, it's just us today. I don't want to scare any listeners off, and maybe it's not even just us. Maybe it's a half of each of us because I am technically on vacation and you are tired. Apparently, you've just come off the golf course and you're I don't want to say burned up, but you're exhausted, right? Because you played around a golf. It's really a difficult sport. With a colleague of ours, Tony Garcia, yep. Right? And then
we were working, by the way. This was not pleasure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, golf's not fun. I'm sure you were out there sweating, kind of like you did when you covered two-a-days to sort of relate to the common man in your Hard Knocks column, which is what we're going to talk about. Also, you want to talk about my Hard Knocks column. So I guess this is really about Dan Campbell because we don't ever talk about Dan Campbell enough, right? But we're gonna discuss that, and you've got some things to say. I think you've ingratiated yourself with the readers even more with another one of your lovely optimistic takes.
And, I don't pander, unlike some people I won't name.
Yeah, so you can live in your own world, and I'll live in mine, and we'll duke it out here, and then we'll get into in the second segment, Carl, if it's okay with you, we'll get into Avila. We don't want to rehash all that, but just Chris Ilitch more and where the Tigers are going. I know you probably want to be the general manager yourself, so we can get into that.
Are you sure I'm not? I mean,
you could be. Yeah, you might be. And then, of course, our favorite thing. But let's start it off. You wanted to talk about my Hard Knocks column. I wanted to talk about yours. So you go first, man, because you are the first name on this show. And it really should be the only name.
The show doesn't completely stink. I was very careful to say it was mostly infomercial fluff. But it was, and the hard thing about this show is as I mentioned in the column right at the top that, I'm a fan of the show. I've been watching it for about 15 years. I know you just heard about it, Sean, so you probably have never watched a whole episode, but I've been a devoted fan to the show for a long time. A lot of great moments and it's gotten watered down ever since 2000. I want to say 12ish. I think it was when the Dolphins were on and Joe Philbin cuts Chad Johnson on the show. They aired it. A lot of, I think, feelings were hurt around the NFL and they didn't like having one of their worst moments aired for millions of people to watch. It was great television, but we'd never seen anything like that. You'd never seen a player who's, been arrested and charged with domestic violence go into a coach's office and be told you're fired. It sent, shockwaves throughout the NFL. So I think since then, the show has slowly gotten more watered down. So it's not completely surprised of what's happening with the Lions and how they're just showing kind of the raw stuff. And I was trying to be understanding of the audience because the audience is not one person. There may be mostly, I think it's NFL fans, right? And then obviously Detroit Lions fans are going to watch this thing, intensely. But also, I think they're catering more to the national audience. They're not telling Lions fans stuff that they already know. And we've already, have we heard Dan Campbell mention the word grit in Detroit? Yeah, maybe a few times, all these little things, do we know that more than half the coaching staff used to be NFL players? Of course we know that, so I didn't want to hammer them for that because they're introducing the team to a national audience. Honestly, they're NFL fans. They probably already know this, but maybe they don't. So I didn't want to be too hard on them, but it was just, there was nothing. Even if you're just a casual fan, what did you learn from that first episode, from that debut? And I know there's a lot of sort of, preamble to the first episode sometimes of introducing the team and who is this coach, who are the players, something, but it just, there wasn't anything really meaningful. You could have still profiled the player in a more meaningful way. You could have had shown something from a team meeting, shown, and it was all basically just this rah stuff, introducing Dan Campbell. Yes, he's a tough coach and let's go get him coach, players like him. But other than that, the Deuce Staley and the Aaron Glenn thing was the only kind of real thing that showed you oh, this is something different. You don't see coaches on the same staff who love each other, but also fight with each other and are super competitive on the field. That's the only thing I really remember that stood out. All the other stuff, the rookie competition or talent show, all this, that happens in every Hard Knocks, episode or season rather. They show something funny from a sketch or a talent thing, whatever. So that really wasn't unique to the Lions. So that's where I felt like they were just kind of copy and pasting some of the ideas they've used other places. So it felt kind of lazy to me that way.
Okay, well, all right. There's so much to unpack here, and we talked before the show about trying to keep this at a reasonable hour. But after that,
no chance.
There are way too many things. Yeah, no. Bear with me, Andrew. Andrew Hammond, our
he's asleep.
producer.
He's gone.
Yeah, he's gone. Do we lose him?
He's
already?
doing his New York Times crossword.
Okay. I'm not even sure where to start with this. But I'm going to start with this. In-N-Out Burger. All right. It's not a great burger. It's a good burger. It's a chain burger. You know what's going to get. It's the same thing every time. This is what Hard Knocks is. They're In-N-Out Burger. It's fun to.
You're saying this just to trigger me.
No, I'm not. It's fun to eat there, right?
Sticking the knife and twisting it.
No, it's fun to eat there. It has its place in our society. It's not trying to be art. In-N-Out's not trying to be a gourmet, right? They're not grinding their own brisket and short rib and mixing it up into this perfect little patty, right? And serving it and making you wait from 11 p.m. to midnight in some bar in Atlanta, which apparently had the best burger for a while, and you could only get it 1 hour out of the week. In-N-Out's not trying to do that, right? But they're still solid. To some they're more than solid. And to me, that's Hard Knocks. So, okay, that's one thing. The second part of that is, maybe the more important part of it is, I think viewers rather, understand that. And when you write what you did today, and I mean this with all due respect, readers are going to take that you are somehow telling them the truth about what this is when they already understand what that is. And I think that we saw that, and I know you love to read reaction to your piece. I think that's why the reaction in part was what it was, because people inherently think, it's like when we talk about Trump, and I don't want to get into Trump here, but there's an identity wrapped up into it. So college football is a better example that's not political, right? If you criticize Michigan State or USC or whatever, Big Ten, by the way, right? There's identity wrapped up in that. And I think that's what happens with Hard Knocks. People know that it's not some hard-hitting show. They know what it is. They like it anyway. So when you're telling them all this sucks, you're basically, a lot of people out there think you're telling them they suck. And I'm curious if you think about
what I'm telling them they suck.
No, but that's what people take from it. And I'm curious, not all people, but a lot of people do. And you'll see that in the comments. You can see it in the tone. So I'm curious if you ever think about that. Or do you just think, okay, I'm treating this like a movie and I'm going to be a critic and I'm not thinking about anybody who's reading this?
That's a good way to look at it. It's a movie, and it's a sequel or the third sequel, or, it's like if I'm writing about the third Godfather, right? Like, hey, you had some pretty good Godfathers before this, and now the franchise has fallen off here. It's not a good movie. It's not, or as good, it's not In-N-Out. It's McDonald's is what you're getting. And it used to be, right? It used to be filet mignon or whatever, and now it's like McDonald's, and it's slowly degraded over time. And that's sad, but they still have had some good episodes over that last span since the Dolphins. I brought up the Browns season in 2018. That was a good season, and that was one thing that I think they worked a little harder to get better stuff. And one of the things that we don't know about Hard Knocks is how there's sort of a partnership with the team itself. And that's probably, Rod Wood, the team president, probably has the ultimate say, or someone near the top like that looks at some of the film and probably gives the okay or the not okay on some of the stuff that they air. Either it's too whatever, it's not flattering or too sensitive or whatever it might be. And so we don't know the cutting room floor, so that is a thing where I don't want to be totally unfair to the Hard Knocks crew, that sometimes I'm sure their hands are tied. But also there's times where, and you and I know this team, Sean, and the fans know this team, the Lions, and we know that there's a lot more meat on the bone as far as other players that they could profile. Something, someone like Jamal Williams, actually, they could have profiled, and maybe they'll get to him. They have 5 episodes, so they have 4 more, and I'm sure they will do some, profiles on some of the players. But they could have done something like that a little bit more meaningful. And I wish we'd seen a little more than showing, I think, what did I break it down to? 7% of the airtime of the show of watching Dan Campbell do freaking up downs. 3
No,
minutes.
It wasn't 7% watching them.
40.
That's not what you wrote. You wrote 7% watching and talking about it. So he was talking about it too. So that's a little,
the whole thing, the segment.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of character development.
Doing up downs, the whole segment.
If I may just stop you there for a second, if I humbly, with all again due respect, stop you there for a second. All this talk about, well, maybe they will, maybe they'll show this. What you did is walked into a theater and walked out 30 minutes later and said, okay, this is what I think about the movie. Even critics, movie critics, TV critics rather, they get sent. Let's say there's 10 episodes in a season. They'll get sent the first 4 at least, right? So then they can write off something a little bit more than one episode. And I saw some questions about that today, and I think that's a fair question. And so I would love to hear you talk about why you thought one episode in, when so much of the first episode is obviously what you talked about, just kind of introduction, why you didn't wait another show or two, then say what you have to say about this particular season.
That's easy because I'm not Sean Windsor. I'm not going to wait till the whole thing's over to cast my decision.
So you're going to make it. So you're going to make a choice without all the facts. That is,
I'm going to. I've been shown. Okay. What I've been shown is one episode. That's all I'm privy to. So it's time to weigh in on that episode. I can't wait. I can't wait a month until okay, let me think about this now. Now that the show's over.
No, but this isn't a season.
Is it 2 episodes? 3? What's fair?
This isn't episodes, I would say probably at least 2, 3 is probably better. This isn't a season, though, where you're writing about a game and you make an opinion about that particular game. This is part of a larger arc. And I understand if you're writing about a season in terms of the coach, you're not going to say, hey, he's great or needs to go after one game. You write about what happened on the field. And then sometimes you do attach it to larger themes. If there's a quarterback that's been there a few years and he shows again in the first game opener, whatever. I understand that. But you're talking about a narrative arc that's playing out over 5-6 weeks. And you took a fifth of it and said, okay, this is what's wrong with it. So again, what's the justification?
Well, the justification is I'm writing about the debut episode and how they are introducing this team to the public, to the viewing public. And I don't think they really did it justice. One thing that I didn't get into as much, but really the audience of this team, of the show rather, it's not grandma tuning in at 10 p.m. on HBO Max and wondering, I wonder what's on HBO Max today. Oh, HBO Sports. Let me watch this. No, you're at the very least a pretty good NFL fan. If you're a pretty good NFL fan, you already know after the last season, you have heard about Dan Campbell. You've heard about the knee biting. Maybe you don't know about the grit. He loves to talk about grit, whatever. But that all these coaches used to be players. That's not new ground. And I think they just lingered on these things too long. Like, give us something different. Give us something, if you want a little exposition, fine. I don't even mind the up downs, but make it tighter, make it shorter. There's something called editing in video and TV's producing. Like, give us something a little better, and it just felt so fluffy and meaningless. It didn't tell me much about who the Lions are. That's the disservice. I think that's why it's the introduction. That's what introduction. I can't write about I'm not going to write every single episode. Nobody's going to do that.
But who is it? No, you don't need to do that. You can wait a few and then make a judgment. But who's it?
But you can't make it who's making that decision? 2 episodes? Is that fair? 3?
Yeah,
5?
I think that's a lot more fair because then you can at least say, okay, they're not going to,
what's fair? How many?
If the
many
second or third, I would think 3. If the second or third, you can write other things without making
and then Jeff Seidel says
judgment.
I should wait for 4, and then Mitch Albom says I should wait for 5. I mean, it's all arbitrary.
But what's not really. You want at least a sense of the story. At least, okay, if they're going to repeat one, if the second one's just like the first one, then to me you got more ammunition, right?
Yeah, but then what if the third one's amazing? It doesn't work in a linear, because the Browns example I gave is there was like a lot of snipping back and forth between the coordinators. I don't know when that episode aired, if it was the third one or whatever. That's something they don't have control over, but I also wonder with that, how much, I don't know what the rule is with Hard Knocks as far as how much they work with the team and say, listen, this is already reported, so it's not like it's a big secret. Or if they happen to have these coaches mic'd up, obviously I think the Deuce Staley and the Aaron Glenn thing, they were mic'd up. They knew that they were fouled. And I'm not saying they played it up, but maybe they did a little bit, the antics and barking back and forth, it was entertaining that way. So you don't know how much they're working with the team as far as how much they can show. And, and I think the Browns thing too probably was a little bit embarrassing for the NFL too. Like, we're having our own coordinators, second, third in command coaches, like fighting with each other, arguing with each other. It's not a good look.
I would say, again, when you say disservice, to who? I mean, it sounds like the readers don't know any better. I'm talking about readers of your column or readers of the Free Press, or just people that want to read about the Lions in general. I guess that's everybody, right? But that's the thing, they understand that and they like it. I mean, they keep making it. They keep, yeah, of course they do. I mean, this is, you and I talk about this. We argue about this all the time. Of course they do. I think you can. I don't want to use reader comments as a judgment, because it's just very, very small percentage. But if we're just going to go by that, I'll do what you did with the series. I'll just say, okay, those 50 reader comments represent the thousands of people that actually read your column. Well, I'll turn it on you and do the same thing.
No, Sean. No, and that's the thing is
they felt like you were preaching at them that they were supposed to know better when they already know better. I mean, that's the thing. So how do you work your way through that? How do you navigate that? How can you get your opinion across with something like this without making folks feel like, well, of course it's fluff. We know it's fluff. That's why they keep making it and recording it, because we like it, right? Like McDonald's, whose fries are better than In-N-Out, by the
way. Debatable. By the way, at In-N-Out, you can tell them how do you want the fries. If you want them well done, or you want them like, soft or whatever, extra crispy, they'll do whatever you want. Anyway, yeah, that's the thing, right? Is you don't know. I mean, every reader is not the same. There's some readers who, I'm sure, viewers, whatever, who've never seen this. And boy, the Lions are on, let's watch this show. And they were like flabbergasted by the whole. But honestly, everything that they showed you, and I wrote about it, the Lions' own internal video team could have done almost everything that they did. They just don't have quite the, arsenal of cameras and mics and everything but the talent, the rookie things of, Hutchinson dancing and singing, and, Glenn and Deuce Staley going at it, that's stuff that the video team could have done. It's like, I don't think HBO was using its access to the fullest potential that it had. That's where it feels wasteful. It's like George Lucas ruining the Star Wars prequels.
I think, again, I'll use your word. That's debatable. I just think the production, we talked about this off the air before the show, the production value, the narrative voice from Liv Schreiber, right? I mean, the way they cut off the editing, the way it's cut, all of that is, no offense to the Lions PR department. They do a nice job locally, but it's just a completely different level, right? It's like it's the difference between you making a 16 millimeter of you and Tony golfing versus, a PGA, the Masters production, right? It's
that's true. You're absolutely right with the music and Jim Nance's.
For sure, and
absolutely,
and all that adds to the entertainment value. But real quickly before we wrap up this section, because you and I are just going to go round and round. You don't care about the readers. What, and maybe you shouldn't. Maybe I'm wrong there. So what did you hate about what my column was about Hard Knocks? Beyond,
I didn't see. I'm not as black and white as you are, Sean. I didn't hate.
I didn't hate yours.
Yeah, and I mean, it was. You highlighted. What that it underscored how much the players like Campbell and they believe in him. And are we talking about the Lions in the next segment too, or we don't? The Lions. No, okay. Yeah. Well, one thing I want to say about that, and this it doesn't have that much to do with your column necessarily, but how you brought up how the players buy in, and we knew that, and it only further resonated or reinforced that idea. One of the players who I think that is the sort of archetype for a gritty player. Dan Campbell's highest honor he can bestow on you, someone who's gritty, is David Blau, the third string quarterback. A guy, if you don't know him, he's a good guy, really nice guy, smart. He's undersized. He works hard. He's always prepared, very professional. And, I think the word gritty would apply to him. However, he fumbled a key snap that lost them the game. And this is where, when, coaches talk about their little things, the grittiness, and we're going to work harder, and we're going to be disciplined, and we're going to be more in shape, that, they have their little mission statements, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. All these ideas, all these high-minded things that any coach brings, doesn't really matter. Can you produce when you're on the field, when it's crunch time, when it's time to do the right thing, and more importantly, to not do the wrong thing? Can you do it? Can you close out games? Can you make the difference in those 2 or 3 plays every game that decide games? And as much as I like David Blau, as much as the Lions like David Blau, you can't have that. You can't fumble a shotgun snap and cough it up, and then they score the winning touchdown. Yes, it's a preseason game, doesn't matter, but it's an evaluation of your players. And I think that's the thing where, even though he is a player who has bought in, he's one of those guys that shows that in your column, they believe in Dan Campbell. Can they trust him? And that's the problem with this whole idea of grit, is at the end of the day, man, sometimes you're not really the gritty guy. You don't love to practice. You don't like to practice hurt, all this stuff. You don't like to push, but damn it, you know how to hold on to football when it counts. That's what I think, where these little kind of mission statement things fall kind of flat on me. And that's not to say they don't love Campbell, and they do, and that helps.
Yeah, they're different.
It definitely helps.
You're talking about 2 different things to me, right? It doesn't matter what the coach is selling. If the players aren't buying, then that team's not going to go anywhere. Just like it doesn't matter if there's no talent. And as I mentioned in the column, right? All this is great. They buy in. That's a start. But if the talent isn't there, they're still not going to win. But you can also have talent and a fractured locker room and everybody at each other's throats, and you won't win with that either. You got to have both. And it's just how it works, right? It's how any group of human beings works, no matter what.
You don't have to.
What it is.
The difference with guys like Campbell, I think, is take someone like Jim Schwartz, where he wasn't beloved, but he also wasn't hated. I think that's most coaches, is people don't love them. It's not like you're going to be my surrogate.
You don't need to love them. You need to buy what they're selling. You need to believe in them, and you need to respect them. Right? That's it. You don't have to love them.
Right.
You
and all this, like, I'm gonna run through a wall for Coach Campbell and all this, like, whatever, just, hey man, he's your boss. Do you believe in him setting you up to succeed? Okay. Yeah. Schwartz, do you believe that, what he's doing, even though he can be full of himself and kind of a jerk sometimes?
Yeah, they didn't in the end.
Whatever.
Right? They didn't in the end. That was the problem with Schwartz. It
was the defense at the end that they would just, they didn't pay Sue, and then, they decided not to keep enough people. And, if they still had Sue, it'd be a different story probably, but
it maybe so, maybe right. Again, to the talent, but you also got to have everybody kind of trying to achieve the same thing. And that's just, football is by far the trickiest, because there are so many people involved. It's much easier in tennis. It's just the one player and the coach, or golf. Yeah. Where you got, hitting whatever, somebody, your caddy, I guess, he's sort of a coach, or she. But no, it's, I'm with you, both things have to work. And to me, that's what the first one showed. And he was about in tears trying to explain to him why he wanted them in pads. It's just like, trust me. And they're either going to trust him or not. We'll see. They do probably right now a little bit, the way they played for him at the end of the last season. But if they start off 1-7, it won't matter. It won't.
Pads thing, though, like that was a weird segment about the pads. Like there's no players complaining about pads. They like being in pads, as long as
they don't. They don't like.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. The first few times that they miss it. They haven't been in pads.
Did you
months.
Not hear what he said? He was addressing it because he could hear people whispering and rolling their eyes and making comments about why are we in pads. He actually addressed that. Have you ever played football?
I've not put on
it
pads.
It sucks to be in pads in August. It just does. Any football player will tell you that, except for the rare psychopath out there who just can't wait to hit the whole time. But when you're 28 years old or 30 years old and you're trying to recover, that's the whole point of that speech, is that they don't want to be in the pads,
Yeah, I don't know if I buy that.
It's not a question. I don't know that there's nothing to argue with. It's
at the beginning of training camp, they miss it. They miss that contact. They're tired of just running around in shorts, and they can't hit each other. They have to be extra careful. I think they miss that contact, and they do know. These are grown men. They know that they need contact to get ready. Nobody's really disputing that. Maybe there's some people, the older veterans with bad knees who are like, and definitely later in camp that happens. But this was this was early in camp, that first episode. So
right.
I don't think
but it's normal. It was earlier than normal, right? Which is why he was talking about the studies. And that's the thing. He was trying to explain to them why that day, why in the math or the algorithm, or however you figure that out based on the science and just the anecdotes of player injuries, right? A lot of just crunching numbers. That's what he was trying to explain to them. And it was interesting. He was almost in tears trying to do it. He's pleading for their trust. We'll see if he does. We'll see if he gets it. If they lose, they're not going to buy it, right? They're going to say, well, okay, fine. You had a little different way and we're 1-7. So what does it matter? You know how that kicks in. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's tough. That's all right. You can keep playing golf, but you're much better at it than I am. All right, man, we're not going to get anywhere with this. Let's take a quick break and come back and talk about your favorite sport, baseball.
Hello, I'm Phil Friend, the host and producer of Spartan Speak, a podcast collaboration between the Detroit Free Press and Lansing State Journal focusing on Michigan State sports. Each week, I'm joined by the OGs of the MSU podcasting game, Freak beat writer Chris Laurie and LSJ sports columnist Graham Couch, as we discuss and dissect the latest sports news coming out of East Lansing. Not only is Spartan Speak one of, if not the longest-running MSU sports podcasts out there, you won't find a show with two people as clued into the Spartans as Chris and Graham, each of whom have spent a decade-plus covering MSU and bring years of institutional knowledge and insight to the podcast. And once in a while, they'll let me throw out a take as well. Along with discussing the latest news, we'll break down the Spartans' last game on the hardwood and the gridiron. What went right? What went wrong? Jet sweep. Again? For both Mel Tucker and Tom Izzo, get you ready for the next game, make predictions, and so much more. We can also guarantee at least one reference to Kalamazoo every podcast. So if you haven't already, download, subscribe, and listen to Spartan Speak on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on your podcast app of choice.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. Baseball, Avila. He's no longer the general manager of the Tigers. Carlos, take it away.
Your column was wrong in so many places about this whole firing. No, you were the one who you finally showed that you can be a little tough, a little negative, dare I say, Sean. I know you don't like that word.
No, I wasn't negative. I was just
to poor Christopher Ilitch. How dare you? Saying it's all his fault and he's got to take ownership of this losing. He can't just hang Al out to dry, right? Because he probably had some say in some of the moves that were made that didn't work out. So what's the tape? How much is this Ilitch's fault? How much does he have to take ownership of this? And what does that even mean? Because he can't fire himself.
No, he can't. I mean, I just the one thing there were lots of things I appreciated about Avila just as a journalist, covered him, right, and a human being. But the one thing I really respected, especially this past year, and even in years past, but particularly this past year when it went south, was how he would get up and say, "Hey, it's me. It's my fault." Right? We heard him do that 2-3 times, and I would have liked to hear Christopher Ilitch say that. Same thing, because it's his team.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's not making the moves, right? But he, it was a tough spot Avila was in. I'm not trying to justify the moves he made. They did not work in his tenure. There's very little you can point to say that did work. But it was just an interesting 7-year stretch, wasn't it, Carlos?
Yeah.
You come in, you say, okay, keep the momentum going. So he spent heavily for a couple of free agents. Didn't really, including Jordan. Was it Jordan Zimmerman?
Yes.
I always want to say Andrew Zimmerman, the chef. That's my food brain. But Jordan Zimmerman, and then I can't remember the outfielder. It escapes my name. Forgive me for that. But paid a lot of money. It didn't work. Anyway, the very next year, it's like, okay, we're not going to spend any money. And then a couple of years later, the next year after that, start trading pieces away. So it's really like 2 or 3 different tenures into one, right? They spend immediately, then the money dries up.
Yeah.
Then they're not going to spend it all. It's got to be through the draft and then trades. And they make the trades with the assets they had left, Justin Verlander being the most obvious. And none of those prospects have worked out. And it's risky business anyway, getting prospects in baseball. You and I have talked about this before. But, I mean, his math was what? 0 for whatever? I mean, there's not a single star on the team that he got back on a trade, not even close to a star. So So then they get to the point where he can finally spend a little bit of money, and all of a sudden he's got this year. And everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. You documented that several times early on when you were trying to be optimistic. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
So I don't know. I just it's not that you want to blame. I mean, you can point the finger, whatever. It just didn't work. His moves just didn't work, and that happens. Right? You got limited talent, and you got all these teams trying to sip their way through limited talent. There's not enough talent to make 30 great teams. There's enough talent to make a handful of them. And you got to have luck, and you got to have a lot of other factors that go on, and it just didn't work. It's really not any more complicated than that.
Yeah, I wondered just, and I don't think they were expecting. I mean, they were talking about, at least having the hope of playoffs, right? Like tracking toward the playoffs. Playing in August and hopefully September, being in the playoff chase at least. And that's why it was reasonable. It was a reasonable goal. Obviously a lot of weird things happened with injuries, mostly that didn't work out. So I'll be honest, I would not have been upset if they kept Avila for another season. And I think there were just way too many weird, uncontrollable factors that went into this season. But also when there's people outside of Comerica with, pitchforks and stuff and torches, then how long can you let it go on, I suppose? And if you're watching ticket sales and viewership go down and all this stuff, then there's external factors that probably you have to listen to if you're Christopher Ilitch, right?
It's a business, right?
Now, let me ask you this. This seemed to be where you took issue in your column. Is you said that he tried to deflect, during the press conference, whether he'd regretted extending Avila's contract, right, a few years ago. And that started the rebuild and everything. And he says, I didn't trade away those players away, right? Our general manager did, talking, I think, specifically about Verlander and JD Martinez. So he's deflecting there. He's saying, he's throwing Avila under the bus. So
yeah, because you have to trading away the biggest star the team's had in 20 years. I mean, I guess he and Miguel Cabrera, right?
And that's where I don't know. Like, this is where we never know. Like, was Ilitch? Did Al go to Ilitch and say, listen, I got to trade JD. I got to trade, Verlander or whatever. I'm going to let him go. We're going to try to get this in return, whatever it was. And Ilitch was like, I don't know if that's a great idea. We don't know what that conversation was like. Or was it always just carte blanche? Like, anything you want to do, Al, I'm rubber stamping it. Or was it like, I agree with this. No, Al, that makes, was that I'm not crazy about this, but I'm going to give you the ability to make that decision. You have the authority to do it. I'm not super in love with this decision, but go ahead.
Well, from what I understand, Carlos, and been told, the money was, they want to get the spending under control. So that was part of it. He's not going to go out. Christopher Ilitch isn't going to go out and say, okay, I want you to sign, trade for this prospect and this prospect and this prospect. What I wanted to hear a little bit more was, I okayed that deal. It didn't work out, right? I wanted to hear, I extended him for this reason and it didn't work out. And that's okay that it didn't work. It often doesn't. People understand that. That was my issue a little bit. A month and a half ago, he was talking about how you and I heard him. We were at the press conference for Derek Lalonde, right? The Wings new coach. He was talking about how much he liked the progress. He doubled back a little bit at the press conference when he fired Avila, saying, well, he meant just the prospects.
Right.
That was not clear to you.
No, that's not what he meant.
No, he didn't at all. And that's I guess why I wrote that the way I did. It's not that I'm saying he's a bad guy, whatever. I'm not getting into the whole issue of and if you're a fan or you're a citizen of this, of this area, if you live in Detroit, there's lots of stuff to pick at. The development, right? The money spent on the stadiums, what has been promised, what has not happened, all of that. And we don't need to get down that road right here with Christopher Ilitch. And I'm not making a character judgment on him. What I'm saying is I just thought he could have showed a little bit more, hey, this is my team, and here's why I did this and this and this. It didn't work, and we're going to try to figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And that's really all I wanted, especially coming off, boy, it sure looks good. And then no, I'm going to fire him and not let him keep the season. That seesaw makes me think, and I wrote this, I'm not sure he knows what he wants or what he's looking at, and he's going to have to figure that out before he hires the next guy. And hopefully he will do his due diligence. I'm sure he will. and take a swing again, right? That's what you do when you're an owner. You keep taking swings.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you on that, and that it's that's what we would have liked to have seen. However, you never know how they view things, and if you have the emperor, once the emperor starts, like accepting blame, that's why you hire people, right? So you can blame them for things and then fire them. And people look at it differently. Some owners do accept blame and they do stand up and like, I'm willing to take the criticism. This is what happened. I'm going to own it. But some people don't. And clearly Christopher Ilitch has kind of been the guy who does deflect and doesn't take ownership, the District of Detroit, all this different stuff, these things that, like you said, were promised, haven't come to fruition. Like it would be, you and I would like to see that. But however, his side of it, maybe his PR people, the people he listens to say, no, the minute that you accept blame, then the headlines are going to start where this is Ilitch's fault. This is Ilitch's fault. And you're going to get right back to, just like with the Fords, sell the team. They're going to be people, there's going to be an uprising. And so you want to stave that off. You want to keep your image. And I'm just saying, possibly the owners who don't.
Oh, you're right.
They want to stave off.
It could be it. Absolutely, Carlos. You're absolutely right. It could be that. It's just that I would contend that in this society, and I still think that's true, is difficult. And as much as we're struggling to kind of, get along with each other in a big, broad way, I still contend that most of the time when you say, okay, yeah, that was my issue, or I would have done it differently, or looking back, whatever, people like to hear that,
Yeah.
right? And they're much more forgiving when that happens. So I think PR, I think a lot of that is just corporate culture, and that has to do so much of that is for legal reasons, right? You have public relations teams, communications offices with big companies where there are millions, sometimes more at stake, hundreds of millions, even billions. And so you worry about lawsuits, you worry about blowback and products and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's just part of corporate culture where we're at.
Yeah.
And
fair.
Professional sports are like that, right? Yeah. But anyway, it's not that I'm trying to kill him for it. It's just what I noticed, and it's just what I wrote. And who knows that he won't go out and find a general manager that'll get this thing going. He very well may. He did with the Wings. I don't know that the Tigers have their version of Steve Yzerman though. What do you think?
No, there's no clear choice that's going to come back and ascend to the throne as he was always going to do. It was always in the cards, whatever. So it'll be hard. But you know what? To be fair, I mean, the other the verse of what's going on with is the Wings, and Ilitch isn't taking credit for whatever Yzerman's done. I mean, he says, "Hey, we hired the right guy. Steve's doing a great job," and so I don't think he'll do that either. Turn the tables when things are going well. But I agree with you. I do wish, I wouldn't have minded if he said, "Hey, when Al wanted to trade away, some of our players, and get prospects," I agree with it at the time. I signed off on it. I agree with it. It didn't work out, but hey, you learn. But it's time to move on. We've had a long run here with Al, and it's time to go in a different direction. And that's it. But yeah, take a little bit of onus on that. I think people like to see it. I think that really makes for a strong leader. So you should never. I don't think any owner should be too worried about saying that this is my team and I agree with these moves. And you don't want it to be Jerry Jones where he's basically running the team, from top to bottom.
No, right. Sure.
But nobody minds that. Like, listen, you don't have all the answers, but take some responsibility and take some ownership of the things that have gone wrong.
Well, I mean, yeah. So whoever he brings in, obviously they're going to try to. I mean, they still need to modernize a little bit. Avila did some of that, and he probably deserves some credit for stuff we don't even fully know. But scouting. I mean, I know they've tried with analytics, but I still think they're behind in some areas. So there's a lot of work that has to be done with that. I mean, their farm system again now is falling all the way back, right? Spencer Torkelson, meanwhile, is what? I saw his numbers the other day. I'm sorry they escaped me what he's doing in Toledo right now, but he's really, really struggling. Riley Green may be, maybe fine. And hopefully he will be. And you don't want to give up on Torkelson just yet. I wouldn't think, right? It's just 1 year. It's not even 1 year.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to wait.
But but I mean, right. So they've got the next general manager's got a fair amount of work to do to try to figure this out. And it's going to have to be somebody that works with AJ Hinch and has kind of the same idea about how they want to develop and bring in baseball players.
That's what's going to be interesting, is how this works between the next general manager, which Ilitch said that Hinch is going to have a role in deciding who that is, and part of the whole search or whatever to find the next person. And that's how it probably should be. They love Hinch, or he is, everybody loves what he's done, and has a really high, his stock is really high, even though the team hasn't really performed right. The next, it's going to have to be, a team, and it's a lot. I mean, I don't know about the farm system, that's not an easy thing to fix. And frankly, a lot of teams don't have good farm systems anymore. No,
they don't.
It'll be tough. It just, I wonder where we're headed now. Is it another rebuild? Is it like, okay, scrap it all? We're revamping analytics. We're getting rid of the entire scouting staff. We're, which, like, just how much does this set them back? Even if you find the right guy, it's going to be a while, I think.
It probably will, unless this is, and by this I mean this season, unless you think, okay, if everybody's healthy, maybe the young guys get a little bit better, get more comfortable, get this year out of their system. I mean, that does happen from time to time, right?
Could. Yeah.
It does. To your point about you wouldn't have cared, you wouldn't have minded if Avila had gotten one more shot. And I actually would not have either. And I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago. That's why I didn't want to call for his job, because I felt like Ilitch could justify bringing him back again, running it back, and hoping there's better luck.
Right. Yes.
What I argued against was, if you're going to tear it down and start over again, then he obviously should not be the one to do that. Right. But if you're going to let it go one more year and maybe catch lightning in a bottle next year with health and everything else, yeah, why not?
Yeah. And I think
we're in agreement.
Yeah,
on that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think when you had Jeff Rieger on, like, Jeff brought to bear all the failures over Avila's career. And that's certainly fair to bring that up. He had all the receipts on that. However, this, I think even Jeff would admit, it was an anomaly. It was a weird season to have all these things happen at once. So it's, and there was so much, rightfully so, there was a lot of optimism at the beginning of the season, and if you hadn't had a lot of these injuries, obviously the bias thing, just hasn't worked out. Or maybe that'll change. I don't know. But, for the most part, the moves that they made to construct this team they made sense. It wasn't like these were reckless moves, and they didn't make sense of why you're getting all Eduardo, what's Rodriguez, all these guys, the Austin Meadows trade at the beginning looked good, and
it did. And it people like the Baez signing. I know fans wanted Correa, and I get that, right?
People didn't hate it. They liked it.
He's a better player, but
at least, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they didn't love it because everybody wanted Correa, rightly so. But especially with the relationship he had with Hinch in Houston.
Right.
But I'm with you. You go back and look at the Baez coverage, and people were like, "Oh, that's not a bad signing." He could,
right, and
he will improve the defense, and he's got some power.
Yeah, and that's where you wonder, like, would he rebound? Would something, Torkelson, what's he going to look like? Later in this year, or after he gets 500 at bats, whatever it is, next year, what's he going to look like? What's Riley Green going to look like? All these things. I mean, I think it's a lot to expect, now they, that's what the shame of it is. If they'd had better health, where really would this team have been? Possibly at this point of the season. It didn't.
Well, and mental health too, right? Better overall health, physical and mental health.
Yeah, that's part of it on a day-to-day basis with this team.
Yep.
Dealing with all these struggles and all the losing, it gets to everybody. So, it'll be weird. Wouldn't it be weird, like, if a lot of these players come back next season and have rebound years or whatever, and it's like, well, they were the same players, but
that's baseball, right?
Is.
I mean, they had good years. I mean, they had a really good second half of last season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did.
So it happens, but wow, I can't believe we're agreeing so much. What is going on here?
You're finally seeing the light, Sean. You're coming to your senses.
I guess I am. Thank you for converting me. But all right, my man, we got to take one more quick break here and come back for your favorite thing. And naturally, I'll just sort of borrow that
as usual.
Will that be okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right, we'll be right back with more Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean.
My name is Kerry Jr. II. I'm a podcast producer and reporter with the Detroit Free Press, and now the host of Freep's new weekly podcast, On the Line. Our job is to understand the issues and the people that the issues affect in our state and region and tell the news. I want Detroiters, I want Michiganders, I want Metro Detroiters to hear themselves and maybe get a sense of peace in this podcast. Maybe not in the topics we're covering, but in the sense that we're the Detroit Free Press. And you can come here to know what's happening and trust that we're going to tell the truth, give you the facts, and do it authentically. We're going to give you the voices that are in those areas, whether it be in Owasso, whether it be in Petoskey, or whether it be in Birmingham, Warren, Grosse Pointe, Southwest Detroit. We're going to give you what it sounds like to be there. So every Friday in your feed, wherever you get your podcast, when you press play, we want this podcast to sound like home. We want it to sound like Michigan. We want it to sound like Detroit. I think that's all I got. So let the journey begin.
Welcome back to Free Press Sports with Carlos and Sean. It's that time of the show, Carlos, where you get to tell us what gift was bestowed upon you in the last 7 days. And then I will say, okay, I had the same gift.
Yeah, you can't have it. I've checkmated you here because you can't have it. My favorite was going to the Lions preseason game, first preseason game, the only preseason game actually at Ford Field this year. Because they play the next two on the road. So
wait a second, you didn't sound like it when you texted me and said, "Where are you?" And I'm going to leave out some expletives.
Yeah, because I was. This is why it was my favorite thing, is getting to see all my reporter buddies again. Hanging out with people, and I think you've said this. I think we talked about this. How like Lions games tend to be kind of like a little bit of a gathering place for Detroit sports media. A lot of people go to those games. Even if you don't cover the NFL. Like you don't go to practices or whatever, but you do come to a game occasionally. So you get to see all the different people, and football is just, the NFL and college too, but especially the NFL, there's something to it, that experience, and it's kind of a bonding thing for the reporters. And you see, it's a special time, even a preseason game. So just being able to sit next to Dave Burkett for the first time in months at a game, and Tony Garcia was to my right, and we were saving you a spot. In fact, not only were we saving you a spot, but a lot of our listener doesn't know this, but you have been known to come to the game just a tad late sometimes. And you've asked me to.
I've never missed a kickoff.
You've asked me to bring you food. No, but you've been late for the food because they do take it away.
Yeah.
So you've asked me, hey, can you get me a plate or whatever? Which I'm very happy to do. So I was like on food alert for you. I'm like, man, what am I going to get? What does Sean want?
You're making me cry.
Yeah, I was ready to get you a third. I already had 2 plates of the pulled pork, and I'm like, can I go get a third plate? Are they going to tell me like this is too much or a glutton? And I was waiting. That's when I texted you, like, where are you? Like, is something going on? And I think one time, like, I don't know if it was an accident or something. You and Jeff were both driving to the stadium. There was some kind of weird thing where you guys couldn't park or whatever. Yeah, so I was a little worried about you. So I'm glad you're fine. I think you had your 40th vacation day that you were using, whatever it was. But it was fun. It was fun to see everybody, the excitement of the stadium. It turned out to be a good game. They lost, but it was a close game. So it was a lot of fun. Now we don't get to see it for a month, September 11th, when they open against the Eagles.
Oh, that's nice. That's a nice favorite thing, Nice. I appreciate that. And thank you for thinking of me. My favorite thing, I'm going to change it. It was going to be that I love, you've been writing about golf lately, and I don't want to get too insidery for our listeners out there, but people are reading your golf stuff, and it's nice to see, because you and I talk a lot about, it's not that we bemoan necessarily, just about how things change and evolve, and the way we write about sports and cover sports and what people are interested in. And a lot of the non-major team sports have become really super niche sports, and we don't share them as a society in the way that we used to, with John McEnroe or whatever as an example. So it's been fun to see your golf stuff, which I think you've brought down to a level of, hey, well, I'm going to go play here and go play here. This is fun. This course is interesting. This hole's challenging, that kind of thing. And people are responding. And that's just nice to see that nothing against the Wings, the Lions, the Pistons, and the Tigers, the Wolverines, and the Spartans. They're our bread and butter. They're important. We don't exist without them, right? we like writing about them. It's great. It's what sustains us all year long. But it's just nice that we can veer off here and there and to have that. So that was my favorite thing. Real quickly, my new favorite thing though is during the last break, all three of us decided that we were agreement on Wendy's. And I've never really thought Wendy's before, but that Wendy's is actual food. And that their burgers, you even said their burgers were better than In-N-Out, which
oh yes, right. I did not. Although they're pretty. Hey, they're not a bad consolation.
No, they're not. They're not. So I just my favorite thing was that we all have our own little guilty pleasures, and that we discovered that hey, we all kind of have Wendy's in common as a place when you're out in the world and there's not a lot of options and you don't want to feel sick to your stomach. You can. I know that's not a great advertisement for Wendy's, but
I think I saw that on a billboard on 94. But you don't want to feel
that's a low bar, but
make it Wendy's.
Hey, a little frosty, maybe a baked potato, maybe a little chili, a burger with some actual real toppings on it. You know, that's not too bad. So once in a while, right? We can all agree that once in a while it's not so bad. So that's my favorite thing.
And that's the one thing we have to remember about fast food. And we talk about food all the time, but the nice thing about fast food is that there's a commonality that you know, like not everybody may eat at Ima or go to whatever, you know, Katoy or all these different cool places that Lindsey Green writes about. You know, you can't all experience the same thing, but everybody's gone to Wendy's, everybody's gone to, you know, McDonald's or maybe even In-N-Out. And so there's a commonality, and you can argue, you can agree. So that's kind of the fun thing to me about fast food. So I love it. I wish I'd stolen it from you.
Absolutely. That was and we kind of debated and had fun talking about it during the break. So that replaced my favorite thing. But I did love the fact that I've enjoyed your golf coverage lately, and I'm glad it's resonating. It's really good to see. Hopefully next week can do horse racing.
or highlight, one of the two.
Or highlight or boxing even.
Yeah.
Does anybody even box anymore? I don't think so.
Not really, no.
Not really. It's completely gone. Anyway, I wanted to thank you, Carlos, for putting up with me for another week.
Just one more week. Are you on, and you know, you're on vacation, aren't you? The reader the listener should know that you're on vacation. You've come out of your, I don't know what you do for vacation. If you sit in a hyperbaric chamber or what is it, you smoke a brisket for 40 hours. I'm not sure how you spend your vacation exactly, Sean, but you've made the sacrifice to work hard too.
Well, I don't know about that. I just, I had another podcast, and I frankly, I didn't want to leave you hanging. You know what I mean? One of these days, the show will be in great hands with you. One of these days I may need to take a break from it, but for now, yeah, I would have missed you too much, my man.
I appreciate that.
So yeah. No, it's all good. All right, Carlos, I think it's that time that we wrap this up. What do you say?
It's been a good show, but too long.
Yeah, too long. So hopefully Andrew will cut it. We want to thank Andrew ahead of time for cutting it, making us sound better than we sound, and just doing everything that Andrew Hammond does, our lovely producer.
Yes, always
and,
behind the scenes.
Somebody who told us over one of the breaks he hates college sports. So that was new. That was interesting. But hey, that's okay. He's a sports editor. I guess you don't have to. There's lots of other stuff to choose from. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, yeah, we want to thank Andrew Hammond. We want to thank Anjanette Delgado, our co-executive producer. We have not mentioned her yet.
I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm going to play softball with her tomorrow or one.
Okay,
soon,
good. Well,
soon.
Apologize. Grovel and apologize.
I'm going to tell her. I told Sean to mention you, and she's going to say I don't believe it, and we're both getting salary cuts.
Okay. Well, yeah. I'm not going to say anything about that. That cuts a little bit too close to home, right? In the past, so we'll just leave that one there. But no, we want to thank Anjanette. We want to thank Kirkland Crawford, our sports editor and co-executive producer of this podcast, and of course Peter Bhatia, the editor of the Detroit Free Press. We want to thank you for giving us your time again this week. You can find us wherever you find your favorite podcast, Spotify, Apple. When you get there, give us a rating. Give us some criticism. Subscribe. That would be awesome if you had it in your hearts to do that. Until next week, Carlos? Is that right? Okay. We will talk to you then.